Hello everyone! Today we're going to be learning how to make this winter silhouette scene. For a full list of materials that you'll need, check the description box down below. Let's get started. For this project you will need a piece of white paper, a paintbrush and some water, and some paint. I've already been painting today, so I have some extra colors in my palette. For right now, you're going to need white, blue, and purple. This is tempera paint, so it washes out pretty easily. If you're using acrylic paint, you're going to need to be a little bit more careful. This is the first section of our painting. I need to let it dry really well before I move on, so I could either do it later today or I could do it another day. We're going to start with white. I'm going to choose a spot on my page about 2/3 of the way up, and I'm going to put a white dot. Now, I know that this isn't the easiest to see, but we're going to be blending it out with other colors, so don't worry, it's all going to make sense. This is going to be our background. The next thing we're going to do without washing our brush is dip into the blue. The blue is going to come out in a ring like this. I'm not mixing the two of them yet because I want to get enough blue on my page to start with. Because I already have some white on my brush, you can see that it is mixing a little bit. I don't want to have the middle of my painting too blue, so I'm going to start moving my blue out to the edges. Now, I'm going to take the white, I still haven't washed my brush, and now that I have some blue and some white on my brush, I'm going to mix the two so that they middle. I've come back to my painting later on the same day, and now we are going to add some silhouettes. So you can choose to do your own. You don't have to do the same thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to do some trees, but you could choose to do a snowman or an animal or some people. You can make it your own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my paintbrush, and it's got a fairly decent tip on it. So I'm going to be very careful with that. I want to keep it like that because that's going to give me a little bit more control. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip into my black paint, and I'm going to go from the bottom and move upwards. So I'm going to make the trunk of my tree, and I'm going to do it off to the side here, because I don't want it to be right in the middle. It's going to be more interesting to look at if it's off to the side than if it's right smack dab in the middle of my painting. So I'm going to have this one, and I might have a second one. This one might be a little bit more crooked, like that. And then I'm going to put one over here, and I'm going to put a really tall one over here. And the reason I'm doing that is because I know that when people look at things, they like to see groups of 3. That's something that our brains look at and find a lot of interest in, is odd numbers of things. So I'm coming all the way down. You'll notice that the bottom of my paper isn't actually painted. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wind up using white and making snow, but I'm going to do that at the end. So I'm just going to make the tippy top of this a little bit narrower. So when I paint trees, one of the things that people like to do is they like to paint down, because that's what they think of when they think of a pine tree. But when you actually look at a pine tree's branches, they go up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, and I'm just going to go like this. They're not going to be absolutely perfect. They don't need to be, because it's just giving you the idea of the tree. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this. Remember, we're starting off at the base of our tree. The base of our tree is going to be thicker than the top of our tree, and we might have a bald spot partway through. You'll notice if you look at a tree that sometimes they have those. And as we get higher up our tree, our branches are still sort of going straight out or up a little bit, but they are getting smaller. So remember, we're not adding loads and loads of detail to this, because our trees are just the ideas of trees. They're not all of the detail of that. Now that I have my silhouettes of my trees done, I'm going to rinse out my brush. I'm going to stop again, and I'm going to let this dry really, really well, because the next color I'm going to be adding, which is my final color, is white. And I want to make sure that there's no wet black left to smudge in with my white and make it gray. So I'm going to leave this here, and I will come back later and we will finish this off. Now that my black paint has had a chance to dry, I'm going to come in with some white paint, and I'm going to fill in some snow along the bottom here. I'm not going to do it in a straight line, because I want to make sure that my painting has some interest to it, which means that I'm not doing just straight across, I'm not doing things just in the middle, and I'm just dabbing the paint onto the paper here. That way I get a nice thick coat that's going to cover if I go over any black or any of the purple. So now that I have my edge done, I'm just going to come along and I'm going to do the rest of the bottom of this, and then I'm going to add some snow. I've cleaned up my area and added some snow to my painting. It's dry now. I wanted to tell you a few different ways that you could add snow. The way that I did it was I flicked paint onto my paper. If you're going to do that, it does get a little bit messy, so make sure you ask your adult and lay down some paper or a tablecloth underneath your painting area first. You could also use your paintbrush or a Q-tip to dot paint onto the page. If you're going to do that, try to avoid straight lines so it looks more like falling snow. I like to use the flick method because that way I know that my spots are random. It's a little bit messy because you do get paint on your hands. When you do it, you want to make sure that you get just a little bit of paint on the paintbrush. You don't need a lot. The more paint you have on the paintbrush, the more paint is going to fly onto your page or the area around it. All you do is you take your finger and you just brush it along the bristles, and the paint flicks off and leaves little spatters. If you're going to use a paintbrush or a toothbrush, make sure that it's a stiff bristle brush. If it's too soft, it won't flick very well. There we have it, all done. I would love to see your paintings. You can upload them to our Celebrations of Learning page on Teams.